All right, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Whatever time it is when you hear this message, I pray that you're poised to receive, to accept, and to respond to words of wisdom. Ashe. So today I want to give just some historical context for why I do what I do and the way I do it, the way I do it. In the last maybe 2 years or so, you've heard me send out this clarion call for leaders, for leaders, for leaders. And the reason why I am doing this is because I understand the urgency of the moment that we're in right now. And this came back to my mind, of course, because of our daily devotion. This morning belongs to Obatala. And in the process of doing our daily devotion, we received a really thought-provoking lesson from Obatala. And it's a lesson about discernment and responding to the realities of the moment. And so the lesson comes in the form of a single, let's call it an aphorism, a saying, let's say, and then 2 animal tales. And so the saying is, there's a day for rejoicing and then there's a day for sorrow. And then on one hand, it poses the question, well, what day is it? He says, well, today is a day of sorrow. Why is it a day of sorrow? Today is a day of sorrow because Ajapa will be warned that he should conduct himself in a way that will prevent him from being falsely accused. Ajapa refuses to make the sacrifice. Ajapa refuses to change his conduct. And as is always the case with Ajapa, things crash and burn. He meets with calamity and it's all bad. Ajapa, if you don't know, is the tortoise. He is the trickster. Ajapa is the most intelligent, the most cunning, the most talented animal in the forest. But Ajapa has one terrible flaw. He's selfish. And because of his selfishness, he only is thinking about the immediate benefit to himself, right? As part of being selfish. Selfishness locks you into a limited appreciation of time. You're only thinking about what's most immediate. Psychologically, Ajapa represents ego protection. Ego in the sense that the ego's primary purpose is to perpetuate itself. The ego is responsible for perpetuating an image of you that you want to perpetuate, even if it's cuckoo bananas, right? It could be total falsehood. You could be in complete denial of the reality. So long as you're able to project that image out, fine, right? And so that's why it's a day of sorrow, right? Because, as I said, this lesson is about discernment. It's about reading the moment. It's about reading the room and being responsive. So Ajapa brings sorrow onto himself because he is not responsive to the reality of the moment. On the contrary, the same saying was given to Ega, the Snowy Egret. There's a day of sorrow and there's a day of rejoicing. What day is today? Today is a day of rejoicing because today is the day that Ega will be advised on how to retain her whiteness, her purity. Ega is a snowy egret. It's a bird who was advised that no matter what all the other birds may say, never tell them where you go to wash your feathers snowy white. Because if you tell, they'll go to that place and they will muddy the water and prevent you from ever being able to become pure. And so it's emblematic of one's integrity, one's sacredness, or the sacredness of one's integrity. It's being able to maintain the purity of who you are so that you can continue to show up in the world in a pristine form. To not let your boundaries be violated so that you can, compromise, but retain those boundaries so that you can continue to emanate who you are and what you came into the world to do. And so it's a day of rejoicing because Ega responds and Ega refuses to tell the other birds where she goes to wash herself clean in the river. And so it's about exclusivity as opposed to selfishness. And they're very closely related. But selfishness is only about the immediate, now. Whereas exclusivity is about the river of life, the river of consciousness. No matter how far a river flows, it never forgets its source. The river is synonymous with perpetuity. And so by keeping the river, or the place in the river where she goes to bathe, a secret, it is indicative of Edgar's understanding that my source of power, of authority, of purity must be protected. That's what's going to allow me to keep showing up and doing what I do. And this is, echoed in lots and lots of prayers that we make about Ori and about destiny, and it's obvious in the way we live. We have doors on our houses because we want to protect what's inside. Not just that we want to protect our stuff, but we want to protect the people who live in our house. Because if we don't protect the people who live in our house and the things that we have, our resources, then we can't go out and do good works in the world either. And so there are rules and there are boundaries and there are parameters that are set that are intended to filter things out and keep good things in. All right. And so now when I think about why this matters in the big picture, it's the combination of standards and purpose that create balance. It's standards and purpose that support high quality over time. All right. And when I think about that for all of us who practice Orisa lifestyle, and this is where I want to drive home the lesson for you. I think about 25 years ago. I want you to think about where you were 25 years ago. A lot of y'all were in middle school or even earlier, right? 25 years ago, I was at the Yoruba Heritage International Conference in Sacramento, California. And Baba Wande Abimbola was the keynote speaker. It was organized by Jacob Olukbona, who is a African Studies professor at UC Santa Barbara. And there were a variety of other headliners and participants there, other Babalawo who were present. And one of the things that really stood out for me, there are two things that I want to share with you along these exact same lines. One of the things that really stood out for me was, number one, Baba Wande was the keynote address speaker. And he stood up, and in the process, this is 1999 now. This is before internet is really internet. This is, there are no smartphones. You know what I mean? It's a totally different era. It's almost like 1999 was almost like 1979 in terms of connectivity. But Baba Wande stood up and he said to all Yoruba people, these people were all Nigerians. 98% of the people present were Nigerian Yorubas. So he was talking, this is family, okay? He says, listen, you don't know this, but you're a part of a global cultural empire. That's how he termed it. You are members of a global cultural empire. And if you don't pay attention and start to respond, you're going to find yourself left out of your own tradition and legacy. Now, mind you, if you don't know who Baba Wande Abimbola is, the gravity of what he's saying is based on the fact that he spent years in Brazil. He spent years in Cuba building institutions dedicated to Ifa. After he was the chancellor at Obafemi Awolowo University for years, not a professor at the university, the chancellor of the university. So this is someone who is steeped in both modern social institutions, highly politicized. A university is extremely political. So to be the chancellor of a university, you're talking about federal budgets, you're talking about, grants, and it's very, very, very high level leadership and organization. And then to take that and apply it in the diaspora and organize conferences and organizations, et cetera, he's talking about stuff for real. He's talking about stuff for real. And he's advising all these other Yorubas. These are businessmen, oil guys, corporate guys, If you don't pay attention and respond, you're going to get left out of your own thing. Because he's seeing what's happening in Brazil. He's seeing what's happening in Cuba, in Trinidad, in the United States. Okay? So then you couple that with the arrival of the internet. And I remember that also. Because at that time, I happened to be working in the tech industry. And it's just by a twist of fate that I got all this access to tech stuff. So I started designing websites. I built the web. I don't have a tech background, I don't. But because of the industry, they paid more money, So I started working in tech. I started building websites and chat groups and chat boards and all kind of stuff, just messing around, right? All the way back in 97, 98, 99. Okay. But as a result, I was privy to conversations when the global cultural empire started to come together. And the level of chaos and confusion was astounding. It was astounding. Very, 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 very few people were able to demonstrate themselves as being astute. I'll put it that way. It's very rare to read something that someone had written and say that this person is astute. This person is seasoned, is a leader, is a veteran, is someone respectable. Very, very rare. Okay. And so when I go out today to see how much social media and the internet has proliferated, and we've been in this online conversation and people have been going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth for 25 years now. But the level of preparedness is identical in different ways. The dynamics are different, but I still look out across the landscape and I see a lot of lack of preparation. If I assess it, the level and the quality of exchanges, the sophistication of our thinking, our receptivity to new information and ideas, the degree to which we have some really intentional learning organizations and learning institutions that are intended to bridge the gap and create articulation agreements between this and that and the other, it's almost non-existent. We look as unprepared today as we did 25 years ago. There's just more people in the conversation. So it's easier for you to be confused because sometimes I dip in and I read and I see that there's clusters of people on this, let's say in the Brazilian sector, and clusters of people in the Cuban sector, and clusters and clusters and clusters in the Ixechê section. And all of them are confused. All of them are in a state of disarray. Still very, very, very rare to read something and say, okay, yes, there's direction here. This person is astute. It's not just popping off and say, I know this and I know this and I know this and no, this person is an astute thinker and is outlining a program and a plan to facilitate knowledge growth, expansion, elevation. It is extremely rare, which means that we aren't preparing people to occupy those spaces, which means it's like, if you were to compare it to city planning, it's like a sprawling city that has no downtown, has no codes. You got factories next to preschools, next to farms, right? It's complete confusion that we're operating in. And to the people, we think is normal because that's what we have cultivated over 25 years. So that's why I'm constantly making a call to leaders. This is going to be a major problem for us in the next 25 years if we do not take it upon ourselves to deliberately produce visionary thinkers, organizers, planners, mobilizers, and doers who are committed to the collective well-being of our community. People who will be like Edgar. People who are going to say, hey, you know what? This is meant to be pristine. If you're going to come and bathe at this part of the river, then these are the rules and the protocols. It is not negotiable. Everybody can't just come and get in the water. No, there's got to be some kind of structure for a purpose. And that purpose is to preserve the tradition that has given us life, to preserve the tradition that has given us direction, to preserve the tradition that has saved us from the most horrifying calamities humankind has known, perhaps ever. Orisa has saved us from the most horrific human experiences and allowed us to come out dignified. Why we are not taking the time to preserve it and protect it in all of its iterations baffles me. But I believe that we still have the opportunity to do so. And that is why I make a call to the leaders. Okay. And I'll do it again right now. I'm making a call out to the leaders. I'm looking for people who are really sincerely committed to improving the world through positive influence. If you're one of those people, then I want you to find out how Oloye or Bafemi Origuwa and the Orisa Lifestyle Academy can help you take your practice and your life to the highest level possible. Visit me at obafemio.com or orishalifestyle.com, and let's start working together to help you live the medicine that will heal your life and heal the lives that you are destined to serve. I look forward to working with you. Bye for now. Odabo.